The Kansas City Chiefs need at least $20 million to tag Orlando Brown, and this is how they're going to get there.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free on every platform. Thanks for making us your first listen. Check out another Locked On show for your next listen. We're brought to you today by FanDuel. This and every episode, they are the official sportsbook of the NFL and the NBA. Make sure that you can make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook sponsor. You can find them at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Today, we're going to talk about how the Chiefs get to the ability to tag Orlando Brown. Yes, Brett Veach said that they hope they can get a long-term contract, but you have to have plan B in place, and that is year 2 of a back-to-back franchise tag. How can they get there? We're going to cover that. Later, we will have the NFLPA reaction, how they can get even more cap space, and we're going to start today with getting to $20 million minimum. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting over at RGR and NFL 33. If you want the athletic matrix, check out rogueapc.com.
And I'm Chris Clark. Thank you all for listening. I've been covering the Chiefs now for 7 years. I think, Ryan, it seems like It's been that long, maybe even longer than that. Really enjoyed it, and a lot to talk about when you start talking about salary cap space and how to get to at least $20 million so you can franchise tag Orlando Brown.
And that's the thing. It's step A to B to B, B to C, C to D. And you have to have backups along the way. Later, we're going to talk about some other things about how they get even more cap space. But you got to do first things first. And I know that Brett Veach said that they wanted to try and work out a long-term extension. Well, Orlando Brown is kind of a conundrum. They went through this last season, didn't have an agent. It is a tall order. So I think maybe Orlando, more than any other free agent they've had in recent past, is a guy that you definitely want to have a backup plan for. And that this year includes the second of a back-to-back franchise tag for 120% of the number that they have to cover. And to get there, given that today they are still underwater in terms of the salary cap, is an exercise that we have to go explore about how can they get that done. The expectation, Chris, was it 19.4 is our number that we're looking for?
I think it was 19.9.
Okay.
19.99. It's just right under $20 million. That is what they're going to need for Orlando Brown. And the thought process is they can get a extension done, but the problem is they have to file the franchise tag by 3/7, and they have to be under the salary cap by 3/15. So they're going to have to create space to be able to fit that under the cap and sign anybody else. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, and that is a process, and it is nice that they can designate the tag and they have a week to work out the numbers there. But in gaining what is now 19.9 plus the 3.4 that they're under, there's some rigmarole they have to go through. There are a number of moves that we can execute. We're going to show you how it looks according to one of the cap management sites over the cap. We will use that as a tool today to really walk through the explanation of what can they get done, just how much room is there. I always laugh about the fact that a couple of years ago, the Chiefs got down to $177 in cap space, and yet they've built not only last year's team, but this team that was able to repeat and win another ring. That is the kind of magic that they continue to need. So how do we get there? What's the first thing that the Chiefs need to do to get to 20 million plus?
First thing they have to do is cut Frank Clark. I do think that they're going to be working on trying to come up with a better solution than cutting Frank Clark. But that is the first thing that they did in this scenario, because he's 21 million against the cap, 28 million, almost 29 million against the cap. You're looking at a situation where they save 21 if they cut him. And in this scenario, they cut Frank Clark, save the 21 million. That doesn't mean that they won't bring him back at a different amount later, but that is the first move to get done.
And so, like, I like the way you put that. They could work out on something else that would include an extension with spreading that out, reducing the base salary. You could even do void years and that kind of thing. I'm a proponent of void years. Chris is not. We'll have that discussion another day. But Frank Clark at 30 should be a part-time player now. And I think we're comfortable with that. So whether they bring him back or not, the point is 28 million is just too much for a guy who should be a part-time player.
Correct. And I will say this, I don't think the Chiefs are a proponent of void years, because you only have less than $99,000 of dead money in 2023 currently. So I do not think that they're going to be using a lot of void years. We'll see if I'm wrong. I mean, that's definitely a way that they can open up some cap space.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a tool they haven't had to go to yet. Will they? That remains to be seen. But
Yep.
that's not enough. Frank gets you, he recoups you a lot, but he doesn't get you all the way there so that you can apply the tag to Orlando Brown, knowing that we still need the negative plus that 19.9. So what else do they have to do just to get the ability to put the tag on Orlando?
Just to be able to get the ability to tag Orlando Brown, they have to restructure Travis Kelce's contract. That is the only other move that I did. This gives them the ability to get to about $24 million in cap space, which is more than they need to be able to sign or to be able to franchise tag Orlando Brown. So I do think that is an easy way to go. I don't think Travis Kelce is going anywhere, so it makes a lot of sense to me to use that as a restructure.
Yeah, Travis has been very adamant about finishing his career as a Chief. I think I don't think he ever wants to play for anybody but Andy Reid. They have had to go through some of the mechanics of his contract in the past to alleviate some cap space. I don't think there's any reason not to see that coming now. What was that? That was a straight restructure that got them what, an additional $6 million? Is that how it came out?
Yeah, about that. His number was around 12 or just under 12, I think. So it got him close to 6 million, 7 million, somewhere in there.
Okay, that looks like 6.89. So that's a pretty good chunk as well. And that puts them at 24. So if they make these two moves, they have what they need to apply the tag and be under the cap according to league rules on the 15th, having designated it by the 7th.
Yep. And that would get them there. That gives them the ability to actually go sign free agents as well. And they also have some other EFRAs and restricted free agents that are going to play into this as well. So that's another area where they're going to have to create more room, which we will talk about here in just a moment.
Yeah, the formula does get complex. That's stage one. Stage two could net you a lot more cap space. Maybe you use that cap space to play a fun game. Our friends at FanDuel, brought to you today, give you that option because it's midway through the NBA season. March Madness is right around the corner now that we are officially in March. And it's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And because all of that timing, they're giving you a great deal, a no-sweat first bet for up to $1,000 in free bets. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and really, really easy to use. And then you can bet on everything from money lines in basketball games to point scores to threes. You can get in on some of the odds on some of the offseason maneuvers in the NFL. There's a lot that you can do. For the basketball, you can roll all those things up, whether it's how many Kansas offensive rebounds they're going to have in the opening game. I think it's going to be a lot. But you can put those together in same game parlays with the threes, or how many steals you think are going to go on. It's a same game parlay, and it makes this game a lot of fun. So don't miss that chance to get your no sweat first bet for up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. It's over there underneath Chris on the YouTube feed. It's FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can learn a lot more there. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA and the NFL. Okay, so phase one is complete. We can apply the tag if we need to. If we're Brett Veach, we're happy that we have options. That gives us a little bit of leverage. It gives us a couple of things that we can do and move around. But that's not enough to re-sign significant free agents that are going to hit the market. It's not enough to bring in new weapons for Patrick Mahomes. It's not enough to go get a younger but yet experienced edge rusher if that's the direction they feel they need to go. We still have top needs on this roster right now at edge, at offensive tackle, and at wide receiver. So how do we get more space? How do we go about taking what we have on this roster right now, good, bad, or ugly, and either getting cap space, saying goodbye to players? What's the next big move?
Next big move that makes a lot of sense to me would be restructuring Joe Thuney. He will free up $9.5 million. That would get you to over $34 million in cap space. If you take out Orlando Brown, figure you're at about $14 million in cap space. The nice thing about Orlando Brown is if you get him signed to an extension later, that's going to free up more money. Mm-hmm. And that could allow them to sign their draft class if they get it done this summer. So that's also something to look at.
Now, does restructuring Thuney, a guy who's already over 31, obviously Travis is 34 according to this as well, does that give you any pause about what it does to the tail end of that contract, just moving some of the money out?
I mean, a little bit, but at the same time, you're sitting here looking at a situation where he's still probably a top 3 or top 5 guard
Mhm.
and played that way for all of 2023. So I think you're looking at a situation where he's still going to be here for a couple more years. Yeah, it's going to add more money to this, but at the same time, I still think he's going to play easily at 32 and maybe even 33. So we'll see. There's not any guaranteed money left in his contract after this, so it's just going to be the prorated bonus.
Okay. Well, and it's good that you show that there of what his contract looks like for the next 3 seasons, because it is significant that it steadies out rather nicely and plateaus here that gives you the option to do some of these maneuvers.
Yep. And I was trying to see if it changes it. It doesn't change it here. So,
Okay.
but that gets them to $34 million, a little over $34 million. That is going to be enough to probably start signing some free agents. The question is they can go make another move and get to a point where they'll have a lot more money available. But the question is can you replace the player?
Yeah, I mean, right now this is projecting here that we would have about roughly $14 million we could see the Chiefs spend into free agency here. We know they got to save some of that back for the rookie class, et cetera. So what is one of the next moves that we can do? And yes, folks, we know we're talking about some of the moves before the biggins.
Yeah, and the next move that could be talked about, and we've discussed this before, is possibly cutting Marquez Valdes-Scantling. The big question when you start looking at this move, it's only going to give you $7 million. You can see that in the cap savings over here at $7 million. So
Mhm.
the thing on that is, can you find a replacement level player for that $7 million? That's the question.
That is the question. And I think the first thing that jumps to my mind is it depends on whether the team wants Juju Smith-Schuster back, because I would immediately earmark all of that $7 million from MVS for Juju, knowing you probably have to go a little bit beyond that, but knowing that that 7 gets you a good chunk of the way there.
Yeah, it would get you a good chunk of the way there, but I don't even know that that's going to be half of what he's going to want in a long-term deal on an APY basis. So obviously, you can play with the numbers, and you can use signing bonuses to expand that and prorate the signing bonus, and that's obviously what they're going to do, and make a low base salary if they go and extend Juju. Maybe that $7 million is enough to keep him in, is enough to sign him for 2023, knowing that his number is going to go up drastically in 2024.
Fair enough. Yeah. And that's kind of the way that they've staggered some of their current contracts. So that makes a little bit of sense.
So if we do that, that gets us to 41 million, just under 41.5 in cap space. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Kansas City can create a lot more cap space. I'm going to say that they're not going to do that unless they feel like it's going to benefit them hugely in this current year. And I do not see them wanting to go and changing Patrick Mahomes' contract, because you can restructure. You can get to 75 million almost in cap space. But what does that really buy you? You're not going to go out and spend it. You'll have 55 million in free agency. Yeah, you can roll some of it forward, but you're going to be moving forward. What is that? $7.5 million of Patrick Mahomes every year for the next 4 years on top of this year. I don't think they want to go that direction.
That's the question. And I think that is kind of like holding that back as a tertiary move that they can do if they really feel that they need to, if they have to go acquire something. Just to make me happy so I can see that large number on the screen. Could you execute that for a second, just so we can get a feel? 41 million here leaves us 21 to play with, plus minus about 15 minus the draft class. And if Chris does this, it's a nicer looking number. I just got to tell you. As it hits and it updates, that's 74 million. Again, 20 of that goes to Orlando, just like that. But you're talking 55 million in spending power on a team that just won a championship. And yes, that is going down the road of what the Saints have done and get themselves buried at the end of a contract. So I can understand your hesitation, and I do agree with it. That is still, I think, the outlier option. So if we undo that and we get back to, was it 41? We realize that we really have about 15, maybe 16 functional dollars to spend. Do you think that's enough for an off-season class right here of free agency?
Well, really, you have 21 million, and I will say I don't think that they need to worry about the draft class at this point because the draft class is going to be the lowest that they're going to have, probably one of the lowest in the NFL when it comes to total terms that they need in 2022, or sorry, 2023. So I don't think that that's going to be something they're going to worry about because I'm guessing they're going to figure they're going to get a deal done with Orlando Brown. I do think that that's something that they figure they're going to be able to do, but this also doesn't touch Chris Jones's contract. It doesn't touch his cap number for 2023. He's in the last year of his deal, and I really do think that they're going to do something with Chris Jones. I don't know that they're going to get it done by free agency. It would be great if they could. They're not going to cut him, but I do expect a extension because they can't restructure at this point since it's the last year of his deal. So that 28 million probably maybe can give you another 8 million in cap space if you are looking at giving him close to 50 million in guaranteed in signing bonus and looking at that kind of thing. I mean, Aaron Donald just signed a contract extension last year, 3 years, 95 million. So
we're trying not to mention Aaron Donald and Chris Jones in the same sentence, Chris. This is
I
bad
understand.
business. But it is the reality. So I think tomorrow we'll discuss about what the alternate is to not extending Chris Jones. Nobody wants to talk about that, but we've seen what a trade of a blockbuster player can do. Even despite all the hubbub around the Tyreek Hill trade, that will give us a parameter to have a discussion tomorrow. But like you said, I agree that they're working towards an extension for Chris Jones. They want to keep him in-house. He wants to stay in-house. I think right now, given that he's 29 years old and he's just had maybe arguably the best year of his career, he's a little atypical in what is usually a concern for a 30-year-old defensive tackle and giving him a multi-year contract. So I think all that weighs towards the possibility of getting it done. Do you think that that's your feel as well?
I do think that it gets done. If Chris Jones wants it to get done, I expect the Chiefs will get it done. Again, like I said, it would be nice to have it done by 3/15, so it counts, and they are able to go out and do some free agency deals. But that's the big question: is can they get a contract extension with Jones done in a little over 2 weeks at this point?
And if they can't, we're going to cover the alternative on that tomorrow. But coming up next, we need to have a discussion about what makes Chris want to come back, he amongst all the other players, because the NFLPA has put out a unique survey about franchises across the league, and there's some very, very peculiar results coming in for the Kansas City Chiefs. Are they as good as we perceive them on the field, as the NFLPA seems to observe them off the field? We're going to talk about that right after this. Okay, so I teased it in the last segment, but can you give us a little bit more of the landscape of what we're talking about when the NFLPA put out this report?
Yeah, the NFLPA went and talked to 1,300 players across the NFL and asked them about what they thought about their facilities, about their owners, about their family, the ability to have a family, meals, travel, all those different items they looked at. And Kansas City came in at 29th. Training was also in there. Strength training was one, and then also health training was another. And Kansas City came in 29th overall. I do think it's interesting. The Chargers were below Kansas City, so that's not really shocking. But I'm surprised Kansas City is at 29th.
That was a reaction I had too. Like, it's so disparate from what we've seen on the field. I was a little surprised. Now, I question the timeline quite a bit because there have been some things recently, obviously, a championship being one of them, that may have changed some perception for players. But overall, when you take a look at where the franchise is, I do find very interesting lines drawn. The strength conditioning staff is generally regarded very well by this subsection of votes by players. Strength coach Barry Rubin is retiring. So there's going to be a change there. We haven't heard that announcement yet. There are a couple of guys on staff. There are a multitude of former strength and conditioning coaches from the Kansas City Chiefs that are spread out across the league. A lot of guys that I know. I wonder if that brings them back and if they can maintain that positive energy that the strength and conditioning staff seem to have. The weight room didn't quite get as much of a glowing remark. Not terrible, but not optimum. And that might have been some of the best things here other than the family treatment area of this response. Overall, I find that pretty shocking, to tell you the truth.
I do too. And I'm sitting here looking at the report right now and looking at all the different grades. Treatment of families is a B. It's tied for 12th across the league. And one of the things that I think is probably playing into this, the Chiefs don't have a daycare. They're one of only 11 teams that don't. That's actually in this report. But the other one that really sticks out to me that I think is very interesting is food service and nutrition being a D+. That's something that I would not have expected.
Agreed. That threw me for a loop as well. We've heard multiple times the players talk about how well they eat at the facility. I know they have a chef on hand that's pretty well regarded. I wonder if that's just personal preference or what, or how this survey was conducted. I think kind of leads into what we can take away from the results. But that's not the most shocking thing in this list, is it?
No, they were tied for 18th real quick. I just want to say that for food service and nutrition. Then you start getting into the things that really shock you. Training room, tied for 24th in the league with a D+. Locker room, D-, tied for 28th. Team travel, F, tied for 28th. But the one that really sticks out to me is training staff, D-, and the 32nd in the league.
That was
directed at Rick Burkholder by himself.
And that's the really intriguing part, because generally what we hear from players is that the trainers, and they group them together. You know, the trainers helped me get this. They understood. Juju in particular, before the Super Bowl, was very adamant about calling out the training staff in a positive way for getting him able to play that Super Bowl. When he walked off the AFC Championship game, he said specifically he did not expect to be able to play, and he called out a number of trainers that helped him. Yeah. And I think that's the differentiation here. Team travel, this is a team that is a little bit more budget conscious. They charter United planes when they travel. They don't have a team plane or anything like that. They don't have an upgraded, super jumbo jet and that kind of thing. So I can understand that. The locker room, part of this survey was conducted before the Chiefs got their locker room upgraded last year. So I think that can probably be taken aside. But the piece specifically about Rick Burkholder, and some of the comments that are in there about why they feel that the training facilities and the training overall program is not to their liking, come down to what is not performing and giving them the optimal environment in which to heal. And that doesn't necessarily jive with what I see on the field.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part to me as well, is that you look at the Chiefs overall, and I think it's really hard to take it from this perspective, but this is the way I'm looking at it. Kansas City overall has been very healthy over the last several years. I mean, their roster, they've lost a couple of players, don't get me wrong. They lose a couple of players every year to IR. All teams do. But when you start looking at whether or not they're missing a lot of games from their starters, they're not. They're generally having most of their starters be able to play every single week. And that's huge. That gets you additional wins every single year. And to see this and to see that it is so disparate in the way that they feel about the training staff is interesting to me.
Yeah.
Shocking, actually, not interesting.
I'm concerned at that point, because we all know that Patrick has Bobby Stroup that he trains with outside of. In fact, George Karlaftis has started going with Bobby as well. So there's an outside element of it, but the discoordination between the training staff and the training leader, I think, is of concern. I'm very interested to see what players have in terms of reaction of this report coming out, and what the current slew of players have, because we're talking about upwards of 20 players that are either just completed their rookie or their second season. Were they involved in that survey? Were they involved in the results that maybe show something different than their experience has been in the last 24 months? That's going to be the big thing. It's not necessarily the report, as shocking as that is. I need to see the fallout and the reaction by the players. And unfortunately, we're not going to see that for a bit.
No, we're not. But the other thing that this is also coming out 2 weeks before free agency opens. And you have to wonder how that's going to play with all these different players that are going to be looking for teams. Now, Kansas City has an ace in the hole with Patrick Mahomes. And just winning the Super Bowl. So they have that going for them. But if players are looking and they look and see, okay, well, Kansas City is 29th overall, that's not a good position to be in. And I can't imagine that Clark Hunt's going to be very happy about that.
I can't either. Hopefully we get some kind of reaction from the organization here during Combine Week. There are a lot of microphones. There are a lot of podiums around. I can't think it'll be anything substantial, but let's hope that we hear something from the fans and from the players. I'm sorry. And we will let you fans know when we do, because it's very important, because this persona of what the Chiefs organization is does directly affect free agency and whether guys want to come play. And we have mentioned multiple times in the last 12 months about how we thought we'd see more of a free agent bump from the championships and from the Mahomes effect that hasn't necessarily materialized. And maybe this is what that's hinting towards.
Yeah, it could be. And it also could be that Kansas City isn't going to be a team that can spend a lot of money every year either. Players are going to have to be willing to take less than they're going to probably get on an open market. Juju is a great example of that. If he's willing to take less than he would get on an open market, I'm sure Kansas City wants him back. But I don't think that they can afford to pay him $20 million a year.
Agreed. That's going to be something that we have to see. We will have more for you when we get reaction. But tomorrow, don't miss. We are going to talk about what happens if they can't get an extension with Chris Jones. What are the options? What is the likelihood? And are you going to be disappointed tomorrow? And then we'll have Mock Draft Monday for you on Monday, like always. We're going to change the format up a little bit. Hope you guys are ready for that. So be here for the next couple of days. We are 5 days a week on this show, year-round, rain, snow. Maybe the mailman takes a day off, but we don't. So we will be here for you. Thank you for spending your time. Like, sub, and hit that bell over on YouTube and get subbed on the audio platforms. Wherever you're seeing this on a website, you can have a direct feed over on Spotify, on Apple, and on YouTube. So check those out. Thank you for your time today, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.